Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown!
Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one!
Oladipo!
Another one!
Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown, Jonathan Taylor.
Galloway finds Rob Finnessy, who fires the three in.
He hit it.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway here at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Don't forget, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, powered by Andy Moore Honda. Make sure you get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com and the wealth of restaurants from Endeavor Hospitality in and around the Bloomington area. Great places like Baby's Market, where I will probably be back this Friday unexpectedly. We'll talk about that later, why I was not expecting to be there this week. On the program today, I believe it is a loaded one. Dr. John will tell me if I'm wrong, but Don Fischer with us. Mike DeCourcy. Is Chronic still with us today?
As far as I know, he's coming on. I haven't heard from him otherwise.
Okay. So, well, because we got so much going, Don, and I'm yawning, is on today instead of yesterday. I got it. I made it in bed by 1 last night.
So you're just a little bit sleepy.
I'm not gonna lie. I am. It's like 6 people took a Louisville Slugger. I'm beat, but I love what I do. I'm grateful for what I do for a living. Let me say that. But this time of year is beat you to death. IU Athletics going through they're brokenhearted right now. Man, has this been a rough weekend for Indiana men's and women's basketball. We saw the careers of 2 all-time greats come to an end. One way more unexpectedly than the other, and I feel so. It is hard to not feel really bad for the Indiana women's basketball program. I mean that.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but something happened. I don't know if it was the Iowa loss at Iowa, either Brad Brown from WRTV and Indy or Brown Braze. I was talking to both of them last night, said that they thought it was that, but it's that or since the halftime that Ohio State lost, but something has been different with that team.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have a large sample size, but when you go back and think about it, they did lose 3 of their last 4 games after making it through the entire season, only losing 1 game. And it's hard for me to believe that it was the Iowa game for a couple of reasons. Number one is because that's a good Iowa team. It took a last second.
I said the same thing.
It took a last second shot, a miracle shot. Like that's not one where you just went out and got beat by 20 and then you're doubting yourself. I think Terry Morin has proven that she probably got, her team rallied around her after that. But the other part of that, Jim, is they had a 24-point lead on Ohio State. So you'd think if it was something, if you would think it was something mental, you would think they would struggle in the entire game as opposed to just the second half. So I don't know what happened, but yeah, I agree. I mean, something was not quite as crisp. And the first half of that Miami game, Indiana was awful. And I think Mackenzie Holmes, I was really impressed with how she turned it around. I think she was 2 for 9 in the first half of that game, finished 10 of 19 with 22 points and almost a double-double, 9 rebounds. But, I mean, that was – look, from the Indiana perspective, that game sucked. There's no other way to put it because you saw a lot of great players. We thought this was a Final Four team, potential national championship contender. But in terms of it being a basketball game, that was about as good of a basketball game, at least as good of a second half as you could ask for, especially in March. That was a phenomenal basketball game. Mackenzie made some big plays. Garzon made some huge shots down the stretch, but ultimately Indiana's defense just couldn't get enough stops.
Yeah, it was eerily similar to the game I saw the night before. Indiana men's down and just chasing the whole time, but much different. Well, not really. The Indiana women's team exerted a lot of energy, chasing, getting back, and then they finally got back at the end, and it just wasn't enough. And they had a couple of shots at it. It just talking. We'll hear from them later. And John makes sure there's sound there. I meant to tell you that we need to grab. The locker room, very emotional. Of course, they had open locker room because it's the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And it's much harder going into it's hard. It kind of sucks because here you don't have open locker room all season, and now you have it. But unfortunately, more than likely, unless you win a national championship, it's going to end in tears
Right.
for somebody.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes earlier than expected. So going into that locker room last night was no fun.
No,
and
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, Jim, but the emotions too of it. It was going to be an emotional. If Indiana got beat at any point, it was going to be emotional. That's the same whether it's men's, women's, doesn't matter. When we talked about this yesterday. When your season comes to an end immediately, there's really no way to prepare for it. It just kind of happens and it hits you all at once, and that's why you see all the. It's what makes March great because you see the human side of the players, the coaches, everyone involved. That's why I love it. You get more authenticity this month out of the year than we ever get in sports. But to compound the emotion and the disappointment with the fact that it was a home game and they had such a great crowd. I mean, I'm sure that it was about as emotional as you can imagine, I'm sure.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know for this women's team, the loss was compounded by a factor of 10 because I don't know which hurt them worse, the loss or the fact, the emotion of Grace Berger. They all felt this duty, I guess I would say, to be great, to be good, to get. I thought that team had a legitimate shot at a national championship.
I did too. Yeah,
and I think that they did as well. And they all took it upon themselves to make this great for Grace. It was her last go around. She got hurt. She fought to get back. She was the heart and soul of that team. And they all it was, I asked Sydney Parrish, and we'll hear from that in a little bit. And I asked Mackenzie Holmes the same thing and they both were in tears with that answer. When I asked Mackenzie Holmes about what's it been like meant to her playing with Grace, I mean, she went into tears before she could answer the question, which is great to see. I mean,
well,
from an athletic standpoint, you don't see that very often. I'll be honest.
Well, that's what I was talking about. This is when in March Madness, doesn't matter if it's men's, women's, doesn't matter the division. This is the time of year when you see these people they're not just players or coaches. They're actually human beings with real thoughts, emotions, and we kind of bypass that a lot when we talk about sports. But this is such a huge, like I even go back to Tobin Anderson and talking about Fischer, the head coach at FDU after they lost to Florida Atlantic. Like it's just these are the kind of moments that make March special. And they're going to reflect on this season, winning a Big Ten regular season championship. They're going to be proud of what they accomplished. But in the moment, I mean, it is probably one of the hardest things you ever have to go through as a student athlete.
Yeah, I mean, because they all know that they could have and probably should have been in Dallas for the Final Four. They're that good. I something happened. I don't know what happened with that team, but something happened. Carl thinks that Mackenzie Holmes' knee injury versus Michigan State was more impactful than they're letting on, and that may be the case. But she was playing.
She was lights out in that second half
last night.
Yeah. I mean, she was lights out in that second half, at least on the offensive end. Now, defensively, maybe she struggled defensively. Maybe the whole team might have, but they struggled to get. I mean, Miami got some easy looks. They got some easy baskets, and that has not been typical of Indiana throughout the course of this season. So I think that was a big issue.
And here's Miami also 30% 3-point shooting team on the season, and we're knocking it down at like 66% last night. That makes a huge difference in any game. It's a game changer. The 3-point, if you're draining 3-point shots, man, that's a game changer. Right. Indiana men's team lost enough that way. So,
well, yeah, they were.
We've got plenty to talk about today, man. There is so much to get to. I feel bad about. It's hard not to feel bad for that IU women's team. I try to keep myself out of that side of it, but it's just hard not to.
Well, I think
that was a hard locker room to go into last night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's the case no matter, what the team, what the sport. When your seed doesn't end suddenly, it's never a fun place to be in that losing locker room. But I think part of it, too, and the reason why you have maybe a little bit more sympathy than you would for another team or whatever the case might be, is because of all the growth and development. And this program is now in a place where it's never been before. And you wanted to see some, not that they didn't get payout because they won a Big Ten regular season championship. And they went through the season with just 2 losses. So there's a lot to be happy about, but you wanted to see them get to the Final Four because this program has not been a top tier. It's not even been middle tier of the Big Ten. It's been towards the bottom. And a lot of these players are responsible for taking this program to that next level. Well, not a lot of them. Most of them are responsible for taking that program to the next level. So you want to see a reward for all their hard work and all their effort. And I think that's what makes it more tough than anything else. You felt like this was such a fun team to watch. It was a great group. They had worked so hard to get this program to the next level. That's what makes it disappointing. Like I don't know if you can be like a Cinderella / a darling team of March Madness, but because of the way they played and because they were such a likable team, I felt like they were a top seeded Cinderella or teams or people were just pulling for them because they were so fun, because they were such a likable team.
Five Left thinks their schedule wore them down, which they definitely played a hard one playing in the Big Ten, but can't say that. You got to look at Iowa, Maryland. So
I was going to say 3 Big Ten teams got into the Sweet 16. Yeah.
It's not that. There was something, but not that. A lot of changes, coaches changing. Saw earlier that threw up on the Andy Moran hotline. Of course, none bigger than the Rick Pitino to St. John's, which I find hilarious. I wish, John, I could have had you pull up the question I asked Rick Pitino at the press conference immediately after his loss to.
Well, let's just talk about it. What was it?
As soon as they lost his last loss in the NCAA tournament when he lost to UConn.
Well, I just said, let's just talk about it. What'd you ask him?
James Presser, I asked him, have you coached the last game at Iona? Basically. And his answer was, I've put all my thinking into preparing to beat Connecticut. I haven't had time to think about anything else. All of my focus has been on beating Connecticut. And within an hour of me asking that question, there was someone sent out a release that St. John's expected to finalize a deal with Rick Pitino. That was within an hour of that question. Wow. But what else is he going to say? Yeah. And that question had to be asked. If it wasn't me, it's going to be somebody else. I was just fortunate to be the one to get to ask that question. But yeah, it was funny. I mean, I don't know what else he could have said, but
yeah.
Yeah. He knew. But you could tell because part of it was in that answer. He said that he's learned a lot this year. Well, when you have a guy that is, 69? How old is he?
I think he's 68. I think.
Okay, 68. He's been around the coaching game a little bit. He's one of the most successful and well thought of coaches in the game as a coach. And so when you have a guy at that level say, I learned a lot this year, that perked my ears up. And then he follows that with, I also learned a lot about what Iona needs as a program to compete at this level, which was him saying, and I ain't going to wait around for them to build that up.
Didn't he say, first of all, I just looked it up. He's actually 70. So he has, the second part is, didn't he say just last year or 2 years ago? No. He said 2 years ago, I think, that Iona was going to be his last stop. So that was a lie. But Ed Cooley, this is the coaching coup of the it's not off season, but Ed Cooley headed to Georgetown. That is a great hire out of Providence. Ed Cooley, Providence had been to 22 NCAA tournaments.
He's moving up the coaching chain.
Yep. Providence has had 22 NCAA tournament appearances. Ed Cooley is responsible for 7 of them, so nearly 1/3 in their history.
And that's a lot. And then, of course, Mike Bray. Look at him. Look at him. Yeah. He's no dummy. He goes from South Bend to Indiana to Miami to South Florida.
Tampa,
rather.
I was going to say not Miami.
South Bend to South Florida, baby. That's quite a degree. That's quite a change in temperature.
That's retirement. That's his retirement plan. Look at that. What a retirement plan of perfection. He is going to go down there and just love it in the sun, baby.
He will. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, but and there's going to be more coming up.
And it's been reported that Micah Shrewsbury, the head coach at Penn State, former Purdue assistant, is in the running or is in talks with Notre Dame. So keep an eye on that one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of movement.
And here's the thing. Notre Dame is not a great basketball program. But Penn State is a graveyard.
Yeah.
for coaches. You can't do anything. We've got to take a break. When we come back,
No, we don't. No, we don't. I got Mike. If you can hear this, I don't know if you saw my text yesterday, but we need you at 9:20 today. We have Don Fischer coming up at 9.
there's a little. That's
There we
doing
go.
it
And
live,
he saw.
baby.
He's good. Look at that little on air.
What a pro! What a pro! What a pro!
We're gonna do it live.
Yeah, Don Fischer normally on Mondays had to move his schedule to Tuesdays. I wish I could have moved mine to Tuesday. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I could have moved mine today to Wednesday.
There you go.
I need to figure out, and I'm going to. It's without question the most hours I have ever worked in this industry in my life in a row. This 5-day stretch was hard, and I'm not complaining because I love what I do. I am grateful for what I do. I'm not digging ditches, so don't take this as complaining. It was just, but I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. But it was hard
tired
because of doing the show and that covering with everything being so late and having to. It was just created all day situations and 18-hour days. There was one of those. There was a 17-hour. The hell, yesterday was a 17-hour day. Made it back from New York in time. I got there at halftime of the women's game last night from the airport,
and still able to sneak in.
Well, I was grateful to Greg with IU Athletics. He took good care of me. He said, "Just text me when you get here. Get you taken care of."
Justin says he saw you on TV Sunday night, right below some Miami fans. Is that true? Were you below Miami fans?
Well, there were Miami fans all around me. I can certainly tell you that. It was, and I could hear them, and they could actually be heard. Fred says that Miami's been added to his axis of evil.
That's good.
Man, yeah, that's very rare to get taken out in the same weekend by the same school.
Yeah.
And both being upsets.
Yep.
Scott talks about this half-court rule. Killed the women's team twice this year, where you call the timeout and advance the ball.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I hate that rule. It's stupid.
I know you do. I don't mind it as much, but they also benefited from it last night. They had 3. Yeah. I mean, Terry Morin used 3 timeouts in a row to get the ball at half court. They just couldn't take advantage of it.
Mike points out Chloe Moore McNeil had just 1 turnover in the game, and it was at the very end when it mattered most. Imagine how she feels. I can tell you how she feels. She was inconsolable after the game. Totally inconsolable. She was very, very emotional. We got lots more coming up. I think John's telling me it is time to take a break now, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. On the program today, Don Fischer. He's up next, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just want to make sure, man. Never doubt you, producer. We've got lots more coming up. Fish is on. Mike DeCourcy, Chronic Hoosier. It's a loaded day. Plenty to talk about. Back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Oof.
Is this our last week with Don Fischer, Jim? I'll also ask him when he's back.
Do. Oh, excuse me. I have no reason to yawn. I slept in.
wish I had more vacation days.
Don't we all wish we had more vacation
I
days?
don't know. I'm not. It's not that I don't have a lot. I mean, I really don't compared to most people. I feel like, but I conserve mine. I try to save mine as long as I can.
See, I've done that in the past, and then what happens is I don't use them, and you don't get paid out for them. At least I don't. You don't get paid out for them.
I used all mine last year, but it's just hard. I mean, I think I probably did a pretty good job actually spreading it out last year. I feel like.
Yeah.
Good morning, Don.
Hi, how you guys doing?
We're doing
well. We're doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine.
Is this your last week with us for a while, or do you have one more with us or anything?
One more. I always do these things through the end of March. I don't do it after unless Indiana's in the NCAA champ or Final Four, and then I might do the one in April. But no, this will be next week. Will be the last one. You by yourself today, Dustin?
No, Jim's making coffee. He's complaining about his 18-hour day.
What a big baby.
Exactly.
We all had those.
1 minute, Jim, if you can hear me.
I was thinking about I'm back in Indiana. I thought about bringing the golf clubs up. I'm glad I didn't because it's freaking cold up here.
Yeah, it's cold in Indiana. It's going to get warmer today. I think 55 is a high. I may have to hit some balls.
There you go.
Might have to do that.
I know there's one day in the 70s coming up later in the week, but it might rain on that day, at least down where
Is it really?
So we'll see.
Yeah, I've heard that the rain's coming, so today might be the only day to hit balls.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, here we go, guys. Jim, I'm sure you can hear me, so whenever you get back.
Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda. Get more to your door with andymoorehonda.com. And welcome in the voice of Indiana University Athletics, Don Fischer. Don, nothing to say but a heartbreaking weekend for IU men's and women's basketball, and really took a hit last night with that loss. But just a bad weekend overall for the basketball programs.
Yep, no question about that. They ran into a hurricane.
Good one.
Nevertheless, both got knocked out by the Miami Hurricanes, which is ironic in itself, but without question, very disappointing for both these programs. And congratulations to Terry Morin's team. They were phenomenal all year long, and just had one ball game, but took them out. And that's all it takes at this time of year. It's really tough in that regard. And then, of course, the same thing happened to Indiana's men coming on Sunday, which was disappointing. No question about that. The loss wasn't as disappointing as the performance was, in my opinion. And we've seen this on an up and down basis all through the last month and a half of the season. And you can say what you want, but my opinion stands. I think these guys were wore out. I think that the problem is at this point, and the Big Ten is learning this, I think, the hard way. You play 20 Big Ten games every year. It is a war. You are literally going up against teams that can beat you. Everybody in the league can beat you. It is really tough to go through. I think they ought to go back to 18 games. I know that sounds silly because of it's only 2 games, but play 2 of those, and you only got 16 in the last 2 months of the season, which gives you a little more time in between. But that's never going to happen. We know that. That's all a pipe dream at this juncture. So continue to deal with it. And now you're going to add 2 more teams to the mix. Are they going to go to 22 Big Ten games when USC and UCLA come into the league? I mean, think about it, boys.
Wow.
Somebody at the upper level needs to think about these things and the ramifications of these things, because now you're going to be traveling across the country for at least 2 games during the year. It's crazy stuff. It really is. And anyway, long story short, Indiana didn't, they succumbed to it. And the difficulty of going through this 2-month period is really a strain on these players. I don't think there's any question about it. And in my opinion, it's why the Big Ten isn't getting any farther than maybe 1 team into the Sweet 16 this year. Well, we have 2 last year to the Sweet 16. And the year before that, it was about the same thing. You might have got 1 to the Elite 8, but nobody's been in the Final 4 here in the last, how many years? 6, 7?
Yep. And to that point, Don, I saw this statistic in which the Big Ten has put in the last 3 seasons 26 teams into the NCAA tournament. 4 of them have been to the Sweet 16 to the Sweet 16. Yeah. So to that point, I do think that the scheduling, I don't know, because when did they make the switch to 20? 3 years ago? 20 games was 3 or 4 years ago. So it lines up with the Big Ten not having success in March and playing a full 20-game schedule. So I completely agree with you. But as you said, it's all about getting that billion-dollar television contract. So it's hard for me to believe they're ever going to make some sort of change on it.
No, I agree with that too. Once you've taken the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in. And let's face it. And I can't wait till we get a new commissioner in the Big Ten. I'm sorry to say that in the sense of Kevin Warren, but I just never thought that he was the right fit for the conference. I saw his first press conference, or he had a press conference at every school. He went to every school and had a press conference. His first to introduce himself to the league, and I thought, I know what his background is. He was never anything in athletics other than I don't know what you'd call it.
Administrator?
Yeah, some kind of administrator. He has no athletic background other than his kid played, and maybe he played. But that doesn't make you a commissioner of a conference that needs somebody that runs the show. And he let go a lot of people based on what I was told from that conference office that had great backgrounds and knew what they were doing, and got in a whole bunch of new people in there. And based on what I've seen, what I deal with and the media aspect of it, I don't think it's been an upgrade in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I would argue that it's kind of slid down the ladder a little bit. The way they do things is different. So, but I'm an old man. I know how things were done when they were successful, and now I know.
You have to look at the Big Ten, though. I mean, I think it lines up and it agrees with you in and of itself. I agree with you too, but you can look at the mistakes that were made and the missteps that were made, and the Ohio State Indiana football thing. That's just one of them, but there were just many things that he just did not seem.
Well, when COVID came about, and he makes this snap judgment, we're not doing this, we're out, we're not doing it. And then they come back and they do it, then they play. And it's just, there's so many things. And I hate to be a negative Nelly when it comes to that role, but I just think that the Big Ten made a mistake. And hopefully they rectify it in the right way. And most of us know who we think it should be, but I'm not about to say that because I know the presidents of the conference would be upset if we said anything about who it should be. And the last thing they're going to do is hire anybody that we think should be the conference commissioner.
Especially if they're the current commissioner of the ACC.
But I mean,
you screw it up, Jim. What do you think?
Way to go. Yeah, I mean, and I just want to say this really quick.
I took the pressure off you, so you didn't have to do it.
There you go.
I'll say it all day long. That's the guy that should have been the commissioner to begin with.
That's right.
When that happened, everyone knew it. They were like, "What are you doing?" And instantly he becomes a commissioner of the ACC.
Well, and of course, you know that the guy that was in charge of that committee was who? Miles Brand. Or not Miles Brand. I'm sorry. What's his name?
The Gary Barta.
No,
McRobbie.
Yeah. Who doesn't know a thing about sports?
Oh my God.
Of that group.
Well, that explains that.
I just wanted to chime in on this before we jump back into Indiana basketball. To your point, Don, I always got the sense that Kevin Warren was lobbying for his next job, to be back in the NFL or to be the commissioner of the NFL. His name's already been mentioned as a potential candidate to replace Roger Goodell in the future. So I just always got that vibe that he didn't care about the Big Ten. He cared about Kevin Warren getting his next job.
That's exactly right. He came in and he was a politician. He is a politician. Yeah. He knows what he's trying to do in the sense of, for him, and I get that. I mean, look, everybody's out for themselves in that context. You want to achieve a level that you set a goal for, whatever the case may be. But you have to look at the complete picture of that person and what they're capable and qualified to do. And I cannot conceive. I don't want to go there. You know what I'm going to say, and I'm not about to say it, but I am going to tell you this, that the Big Ten is not the same organization as it was when it was under Jim Delaney. And as much as I dislike Jim Delaney knew what he was doing as a commissioner.
And did it well, no doubt. Indiana basketball now comes to an end for both teams, like we said, but for the men's program, there is going the huge difference between the men's and the women's. There's going to be a huge difference in faces on this program next year, in my opinion. We know that they're losing 3 seniors in Miller Kopp, Brace Thompson, and Trace Jackson Davis, but I think that in today's age that there's going to be others that hit the portal, but Indiana's going to have to do a good job in the portal because they need to upgrade in a few places. Don, they have got to get shooters in here, and you don't know who all you're losing just yet, but you know you have to replace Trace Jackson Davis. You got Malik Renew, but you still have to have somebody else. You're losing Race Thompson as well.
Right. The transfer portal this year will be as important as it has ever been for this Indiana basketball program. And obviously it hasn't been around that long, but it's been in practice now for what? This is the 3rd year. And the portal this year will be huge because if there were high school players out there that were still available, Indiana would be going after them. And I have no idea if there's anybody that they're going after who would be a freshman at college next year that's still available that they think can really be a factor. And they're going to have somebody that can come in here and be a factor right away. Because, again, you're losing Trace and Race. And Malik obviously is a credible fix for the post, but you're going to have somebody behind him. And Logan Duncombe, there's a real question mark on whether he's going to come back or not, whether he can play to the level of which Indiana needs. And so, therefore, you're going to have somebody out of that portal, I would think, that can fix this issue. And they're going to need wings. They need wing players who are 6'6".
Badly.
Just look at what Miami had on the floor, and compare Indiana with Miami's athletes and athleticism and size and what they were able to do with it. And I'm not putting the Indiana roster down in any way. I'm just simply saying, look at the facts. And again, part of that is, in my opinion, was due to the scheduling and the journey that Indiana had through the Big Ten. But again, from an athletic standpoint, you've got to be able to find guys that can absolutely score the basketball. And it doesn't need to be just 3-point shooting, but it has to be a factor there. And we're giving up Miller Kopp, who's the best 3-point shooter on this team, who should have shot a lot more 3-pointers, in my opinion, through his career at Indiana. But he's not going to be back. And who else on this team is a 3-point shooter? Troy Galloway, you could say, yeah, but he's kind of the same role that Miller's had. He's not taking a lot of threes, and he's doing more. He plays so hard at both ends of the floor that I think he was one of the guys that was really wore out at the end of the year. And he didn't have a very good game against Kent, but he had a really good ball game against Miami. At the same time, it boils down to this. They have got to upgrade the level of talent on their roster. And if they are not able to do that through the portal, next year is going to be a long year.
And tell me if I'm wrong on this, Don, but it seems like to me in the month of March, the biggest issue, not just with Indiana, but across the Big Ten, is the Big Ten they are bereft of players who can drive the basketball to the basket and be aggressive, either get to the foul line or convert. It seems like the Big Ten is almost more of a jump shooting league. And I don't know if that's because you typically have had guys like Zach Edey, Kofi Coburn, Luke, some of those guys on the interior, Trace Jackson Davis. But to me, when you watch that Indiana game, you talk about the athleticism. There's just Jalen Hood-Schifino can get to the rim, but outside of that, you got to have 2 or 3 guys that if you're not shooting the ball well, they can at least get to the rim, get you some easy baskets, or at least draw contact and get to the free throw line. That's been a problem for Indiana and the Big Ten, I think, in the past 3 or 4 years.
Well, and to your point of what kind of players Indiana has, that there's a style change that has to take place too.
Yeah,
I mean, that you're not going to be able to pick and roll your way into Trace Jackson Davis every time you walk on the floor next year. I mean, Malik is a really good post player. I think he's going to be terrific, but he is not as the same kind of an athlete that Trace is. So he's going to be easier to double because he's not as quick and as athletic. He's got a tremendous touch inside. He has got to learn how to pass the ball out of the double team, and he's got to become more proficient at that. But at the same time, if you can't do the same things with Malik as you did with Trace, and you're not going to be able to, in my opinion, on a consistent basis, you've got to have a different way of going about playing the game. And I think that is going to be in the coaching staffs and Mike Woodson's parameter to do and to change, because I think their style of play will have to change next year with this group that they currently possess and whoever they bring in off the transfer portal. And that'll dictate a little bit about how much of a style change drama we're going to see.
I agree with you completely. And before I get to that, Leslie, with a great catch to your point earlier, pointing out that the team that actually made it in from the Big Ten didn't play all 20 games.
That's a good point.
They had one less game to play.
Yeah.
So by technicality, that even further backs up your point. But yeah, I agree with you. And we've seen that so many times. Teams like Purdue that get in, not just Purdue, but and face teams that are so different, athletic, fast. Indiana obviously missing Xavier Johnson in a game against Miami, but wow, the athleticism. If it didn't come through on TV, if you were there in person, it was mind-boggling to watch those guys. And Omier, Norchad Omier, every time you're looking around following the action and damn it, he's underneath the basket and he's got position every time. He had position. It was a mind-boggling, and he pulled down 17 rebounds, 8 offensive rebounds, which is as many as Trace Jackson Davis had in total for the game for Indiana. So they just looked out of sorts. But this team was also one that they seem like they'd get full of themselves after big wins, and then they didn't come back with that same intensity that they would at post Purdue win. They come home and get blown out. We've seen it happen a couple of times, and they just didn't seem to have this. They had great intensity on Friday night, but it was not the same on Sunday, and I don't know why.
Well, that stretch that they had, if you remember, after they got beat by Penn State, Northwestern and Penn State beat them in Iowa. Of course, they lost to Iowa too. That start the restart of the Big Ten season. they had that stretch there where they played terrific basketball for 9 or 10 ball games. I mean, they played really, really well through that period. And again, it boils down to, in my opinion, and I know you're saying they get full of themselves a little bit, but again, I think it boiled down to the fact at the end of the season, that last month or so, they started up and down, up and down, up and down. And I just think, and of course, the roster changed a little bit too, in the sense of, Race was out for a while, and without question, the fatigue factor, I think, just sat in. I just think it was such a critical thing, and maybe part of that's on the coaching staff too, in the sense of, you got to give these guys some rest. You can't practice 2 hours every day and look at film for 35 minutes and time after day after day. It becomes it's a grind anyway. It's a grind to play these Big Ten matchups. And I just think you got to give them a little less. I mean, Bob Knight started practicing less and less, starting with the 1st of February every year, because he wanted players to have their legs at the end of the season. And he was a master at that, understanding that. He didn't like it all the time because Knight loved to practice, especially if they weren't playing well. But he knew that if he ran them into the ground, that they weren't going to be able to perform at the end of the season. And so you back off and practice and those kinds of things. And I wasn't in a lot of practices here in the month of February, so I don't know how much they backed off. But Mike told me on our talk show one night that they hadn't backed off practice at all. This was back maybe mid-February. And I asked him that very question on the air. I said, how much are you practicing now? Have you backed off any of your practice time? And he said, no. So I'm just saying.
I hear you. Don, what's up next for you, brother?
What do you think is up next for me, man?
I already saw it on the comments. Golfing time for Don, man. That's the one thing none of us expected to be nowhere this coming weekend.
Yeah, I will. I probably won't be. I will probably hit balls, maybe some today. I don't know. I've got things I've got to get done, and you at the end of the season, when it's all over with, you finally get back home. You've got things that I got to do this, and this. I got to clean up that. I got an office here that looks like the hurricane hit it. So at any rate, I got a lot of things I got to get done here, but you can bet in the next week, if I get all these things taken care of, that I'm going to be on a golf course a bunch.
Well, we look forward to it, brother, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
I actually have one more show next Monday. We got another show. Come on, man. I want to talk about the Final Four, and I'm rooting for Dusty May. I'm rooting for
That's
Florida.
right.
That's right.
That's my team. That's my team, baby.
That's right. I sent some on tweet out last night to get on the FAU train. We'll go out and hopefully it warms up enough for you to hit the range, man. And we'll talk to you next Monday.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The great Don Fischer joining us, and we're up next. The great Mike DeCourcy. Looking forward to talking to Mike as the tournament has been as wild as it's ever been. We've got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant, located at Patterson and Rogers in Bloomington. Back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Golfers, here's a
Hey, Mike.
Good morning,
thanks for
Mike.
the flexibility, as always.
Morning, everybody.
Jim's off refilling his coffee again.
I was going to say, good morning, Jim's microphone.
He's been whining all day. He's been so busy. You probably haven't done a single thing, have you, Mike? You've just been sitting at home, feet kicked up on the stool.
Yes, doing nothing.
Where are you? Where are you going for the region for the
Louisville.
Sweet 16? Louisville.
Yeah, the easy drive,
There
no,
you go.
don't have to pay for a flight, all that.
I got to say, though, of all of the fields for each regional, the Louisville regional is definitely the least, how do you say it? Like, has the least big brand fan bases, I guess, if that makes sense.
That's true. Absolutely true. It was inevitable from the moment we saw the bracket. The bracket was so imbalanced. Alabama was given a layup, and then everybody that had even the slightest potential to challenge them took an early exit, which no surprise.
Yep.
It's this is like the first time in the history of the tournament that the West region is by far the toughest region. That almost never happens because usually it's like you stick everybody out there that doesn't, that's not good enough to be close to home. But obviously with UCLA and Gonzaga being so good and then stashing Kansas out west, it became a really difficult regional.
Well, we can't say Gonzaga's too good. Jim will lose his mind. He doesn't like to give Gonzaga any credit for anything.
You're one of them, huh, Jim?
Am I? I don't know. I guess I am. I've been labeled. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine, Jim. How are you?
I'm tired. I'm not lying. I can't wait. When we're done, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to bed.
Oh, smart move.
Well, I went to the women's game. I got home last night in time to make it to the women's game at halftime. And I probably should just skip that.
Yeah, that was a disappointment.
That was a way a bigger disappointment than the men. Just because I thought that they had a legitimate shot, not just going to the Final Four, but making noise. But something happened to that team. They were so dominant. And then all of a sudden, they weren't, and something was different.
All right, here we go, guys.
Okay.
Entrees, a coffee bar, bread, pastries, all made fresh and mouthwatering. Stop by Feast, Market, and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Had to think about it for a second. I forgot what day it was, but it's always a good one. Walking in our good friend Mike DeCourcy, of course, brought to you by Remax Realty and Cheryl Sizemore. Mike, with the only perfect bracket left in America, I'm going to guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy I still have 3 of my Final Four left.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to say that's almost remarkable after all that has happened in this tournament. Yeah, I don't know if we should be surprised or not, because all season we've talked about how college basketball is getting more, the parity seems to be rising. I don't know. The portal, I was just thinking about this and talking to Don, and Don Fischer was with us on just previously, of course, but how important the portal is going to be for Indiana next year. And I'm like, I think of all the people who said, I hate the portal. Well, let me tell you, Indiana is going to be dependent upon the portal next year. So you can hate it all you want if you don't like it, but it is going to be Indiana's lifeline to being successful next year, or not, and many other teams. But for those of you that follow the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating that when this all became a thing, and it started really with the abundance of waivers that were being granted. And that was when a lot of people were agitating for the concept of the immediate transfer eligibility. And so the mid-major coaches saw this coming, and they were like, they were screaming that this was going to crush them, that they were going to get destroyed and all their players are going to go to the highest level. And it's happened, but they didn't get crushed. They still win as many games in this tournament as before, if not more. I mean, we've had 3 consecutive years of number 15 seeds in the Sweet 16.
That's crazy.
We didn't have one until 2013, and now we're getting them every year. We had a second 16 seed win in 5 years, 2018, 2013, 5 tournaments, because we didn't have one in 2020. So our second in 5 tournaments
that shouldn't have happened because Purdue should have never been a number 1 seed. That's another discussion, but
no, Purdue earned their number 1 seed. They belong.
I know, but I disagreed all year that they were one. I think that they were the softest number 1 seed in the history of the tournament.
Well, they may have been, but they also won dual Big Ten championships.
I know.
Thank you.
It was a weird deal. I get
what
it.
you're saying, but you can't say I don't like that team, so they shouldn't be a number 1 seed.
No, it has nothing to do with liking.
I don't mean by don't like because they're Purdue. I mean I don't think they're good, so they shouldn't be a number 1 seed. You have to look at what they've achieved. They defeated, and I'm doing this off they defeated Duke, Gonzaga, and
Marquette.
One other high major team out, West Virginia, out in Portland. They
is remarkable for what they. I couldn't when you see them. It was like, how's this? Didn't get how it was happening all the time. But
no, you're right. You're right, especially at the end of the year when they won the Big Ten tournament. At that point, Braden Smith had lost some of the confidence and swagger he'd played the first 2-3 months with. They'd stopped making shots on a regular basis. Fletcher Lawyer hadn't been consistently making shots for a while. So by the time they arrived there, I understood the concerns about it. And then they went out and won 3 games in 3 days. So there was nobody that had a better season than them beyond.
It was an odd thing. I agree with you. It's hard not to. I thought UCLA probably should have been in that spot, but
UCLA played in a league in which they had really only one other elite competitor, in which they got 4 total bids in that league, one of them in a first 4. And although UCLA had a great year and won the league by multiple games, the second best team in their league beat them 2 out of 3. So I don't see how you can make a case for UCLA over Purdue. That's
the numbers are there. I agree. The numbers are there. You can't argue with the numbers. I agree. I say that over and over. And that's what you have to go by. And it's just a weird dynamic this year.
Yeah, but all that said, they still should have been able to beat Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yes.
They just did not. They didn't perform in that game, and I thought that I thought there were moments in that game when Matt Painter needed to say, yes, this has worked. And I will tell two versions of this story. One, I thought that he absolutely had to say, this is not working. Braden Smith can't play in this game tonight, especially down the stretch. Because he'd shown all the way through that game that he couldn't play in that game. He's had a terrific year, but he wasn't there that night. And so I know that you don't have many other options, but all the other options were better at that point. But at the same time, I will say that I sat there when Purdue, in fact, when Purdue played Northwestern at Northwestern and was sitting there in the green room with Rafael Davis. And I was saying that Chase Audige had to come out for I believe that was the Purdue game. Chase Audige had to come out for Northwestern because he just wasn't getting anything done and he was hurting them. And then he came around and made the 3 biggest shots of the game. So that's why coaches do that. And that's because they believe that eventually the player will help them win the game. And unfortunately for Purdue on Friday night, that did not occur. It never came around. Braden never was able to get himself around to being the player he had been for most of this season.
And I believe that helped our friend Dusty May, right? They're in the same bracket, correct?
Yeah.
That's because didn't Florida Atlantic play Fairleigh Dickinson after that?
Sunday night, and it was a good game, competitive game, but FAU won, and that now they're in the Sweet 16.
So hopefully they've got Tennessee coming up next, March 23rd. I don't know if that's a Thursday.
I've got to mention this because we talked about this. I sent it out on Twitter when the tournament started. Because we've been workshopping this. I've come up with Mike's perfect nickname, by the way, Jim. It's Mike DeCourcy. Not Mike DeBrackets. It's Mike DeCourcy. It works. It's kind of punny. It's what we're going with. So
all right. I have not been courtside as much in 2022-23 as I usually am because of the various other responsibilities I have. But I am courtside now. I was there for the games in Greensboro that were mostly great, really interesting, compelling games. I saw Kansas State, Marquise Noel take down Kentucky more or less all by himself. My only disappointment in Greensboro was that I went to Kansas State's press conference to talk to hear from Jerome Tang and Marquise and Keontae Johnson, et cetera. I went, and then I wanted to try to get back to the locker room, the K-State locker room, before they got there. But I could, the way the hallways went, I couldn't make it because I wanted to see, I'm 5'7.5", rounded up to 5'8", always round up the halves, never round down, always round up. And so I wanted to see like how I measured up to Marquise. That's what I wanted to see. But he was already there and sitting down by the time I got there, and I didn't have the guts to ask him to stand up. I did that once at one of the tournaments out in Vegas when Tyler Eulis was a prospect, and I made him go back to back with me because I wanted to see if he was taller than me, and he is, by the way, by a little.
What we need to do, Mike, is we're the same height.
Ahead.
We need you and I to somehow get an interview with Zach Edey at some point to see if I can outstretched arm. I feel like that would make it funny. But he was with Tracy Wolfson, I think.
Tracy is.
She's like 5'5"
does
or
a
something.
terrific job. Great lady. She really is. She's a wonderful person. One of the kindest people you could ask to meet, and does a fantastic job. And she was at the Big Ten tournament doing the interviews with Zach, and the contrast was significant. Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. Don Fischer on with us just before, and again, the continued lack of success of the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament. In specifics to Indiana, he thought that they were fatigued, and is why their performance was so lackluster against Miami. But I've seen it too often this year to label it fatigue. Number one, number two, it's the NCAA tournament. You bring it. You bring it if you want to bring it. I just think this for whatever reason, this team would just get full of itself after big wins and then not show up in the next game. And it oddly, even though it's the NCAA tournament, I don't know how that would be possible, but it's what it looked like.
I thought that there were some significant errors in the way they played that game. And I go back to when they fought their way back to the lead and they got the steal. I think it was 52-51. I might be wrong on the numbers. And they got a steal and they had an opportunity to stretch that lead. And Miller Kopp decides that's the time to take a dagger off balance three. Really?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing?
Right into the clock. I'm like, never done that all year long.
I don't know what that was. I mean, if they were up 8 and you're trying to just say you guys are going home, but you just got back in the game and you're trying to take that shot, and so there goes that possession, and then like I believe 2 of the next 3 possessions, so that's 4 total possessions I think in a very short period when the game was still in the balance, where Jalen took forced threes that were worse than this one because at least that one was in transition, and sometimes players do. The problem with it, the number one problem was it wasn't the time, but the number 2 problem was it like he didn't have his feet under him. He was not on balance, so I don't know what Miller was doing. But then Jalen took 2 in the half court that were forced, and it's like that's maybe where Don's talking about the fatigue, because when you take shots that are basically. I don't want to work that hard to get a shot, so I'll just take this one. That kind of thing. I think that's what I saw there. So he may be right about that fatigue was a problem, but everybody's playing on 2 days rest, and it's not like Indiana played the full conference tournament. They played one more. They played the same number of rounds, I believe. They played in the semis, right? That was their Penn State loss. That was a semi loss. Is that right? In the Big Ten. It's just the only difference was that it was a different day, that because of the way the ACC tournament is structured, they played on Friday and lost to Duke. Miami did, and then the next day the Hoosiers came back. So we're really talking about a difference of 12 hours because that was an afternoon versus an evening. So we're talking about 12 hours ish, maybe 14 that Indiana played more recently than Miami did. So I don't think that that's really a comfortable excuse vis-a-vis who you're playing. I was disappointed in how they executed in that game because it was there for them. And then late in the game, you're playing two bigs and you're getting out rebounded by a singular big who is shorter than both of yours. Again, maybe that's what Don saw. He was courtside and he knows that team way better than I do. So I'm not gonna doubt what he's saying. And he may have the explanation for why it was that way, that they didn't back off practice enough, taper their practices down so that they were fresh for these games. That's quite possible. At the same time, there were significant concerns for me about the way IU executed their offense. I just didn't think that, stashing Miller in the corner and leaving him there just never made sense to me for as long as they were doing it. And they did it through much of the second half of the year, if not longer than that. Every now and then he'd get a shot, but for the most part, there weren't enough shots for a guy who shoots 45% from 3-point range. There weren't enough shots for him, and everything went on around him. And I thought that they were not taking great advantage of a significant weapon that most teams in college basketball would work very hard to get that player quality shots.
Especially because that is ultimately what beat them multiple times. Teams shooting 3-pointers. They were losing games 3-2. But we got to take a break. John's trying to keep us on course, so we'll do that. The great Mike DeCourcy's with us. His bracket's still active, man. His teams are still in it. We got more to talk about as this tournament rolls on to the Sweet 16. Back with more after this, brought to you by Barber Pop Real Estate Services. If you live in Southern Indiana, Louisville area, Floyd, Clark, Harrison, Scott County areas, Barber Pop has served those communities for over 3 decades. Reach out to Barbara at barberpop.com or our friend Matt Lincoln, Matt at barberpop.com. Back with more Mike DeCourcy right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Andy Moore Honda. I'm giddy, Mike. When I get done with this show, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the Nestea plunge backwards into my bed.
You can just
I don't have to scurry for flights this week. No, I don't have to scurry. I don't have to scurry down and wash all my clothes and repack everything. That's sad, but I definitely thought the women were going. I don't know what the hell happened to them, but something did. But
yeah, they really struggled. The final.
Well, they lost 3 out of their last 4 games. You lose 4 games all year long, but 3 of them come at the very end.
Right. Now, 2 of those were to Iowa, right? I think. Yeah.
Just
one. Yeah.
Just
the one. Just the one.
Just the one on the road, which.
Yeah.
God dang it, that was a tough loss.
Yeah.
And then they lose
last night. They just couldn't stop. They couldn't stop the ball at all. I mean, that last possession, I thought. With the way the game was going, I thought they needed to gamble on that instead of letting the ball come in. Just dive after the ball if you get it, because they weren't stopping anybody at the rim. So dive after the ball. If you can knock it loose, then you can create chaos, and then maybe the time's gone. But once that ball got in the lane,
and they score, it's the same.
You know what was funny to me about that last Miami shot was I don't remember who. I don't. Yes, because she pump faked and almost pump faked into a block shot. It's like she made a move. She should have just went straight up with it, but she pump faked. And then after she got done with her pump fake and took her actual shot, that's when a hand was in her face. If she would have just gone up, she would have had an uncontested shot. I mean, it went in, so it doesn't matter. But it was just funny to me that she had a pump fake against the air and then had a contested shot at the basket.
But there's so many teams that are feeling like that. As a matter of fact, they all feel like that except for one.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I said. I put this on Twitter. This is like the thing I love about March that we never really talk about is you get the human element more
than is what it is.
Well, you get the human element though. Look at that Tobin Anderson press conference. Look at the Amir Abdul-Rahim press conference. Like these, you finally get to see that they're not just coaches and players. They are human beings, by the way.
Let me tell you, the hardest thing to do is to go into a losing locker room afterwards. It is no fun, and you're the absolute last person that they want to see.
Just simplest and easiest way to avoid decision fatigue. You pick your plan and pick up at BB's Market with no extra charge. So leave the heavy lifting to us and enjoy healthy eating with stocked meals in your fridge. Order online today at thefreshfork.com. Fresh Fork is a proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Courtroom Sports Grill in Bedford. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network joining us as always. Before we get to the rest of the tournament, because there is plenty to talk about, the Big Ten continues to have a little bit of success in the national tournament. Michigan State, probably not a team that would have been expected to be the one left standing right now, is the one left standing. But again, the Big Ten is with all the teams in, only one team left. Why is that? I mean, this is going on year after year.
Look, people love to bash the Big Ten. It's like,
I'm not bashing. I'm just asking.
I know. I'm just saying. Like, why do they only have one team left? Because they were supposed to only have two. That's all. Like, that's the simplest part of it. Is like, okay, if Indiana and Purdue were both alive today, okay, and there had been any upsets and Michigan State had gone home like they were supposed to. Let's just say that Indiana and Purdue were alive. This conversation would still be happening.
Yep.
100%, because they lost 6 of the 8 teams, even though they were supposed to lose them all.
Right.
It's just like the thing that I love March, but what drives me crazy about March is how many people, like, I want people in the tent, you know what I mean? I want people to turn it on, and I want people to watch, and I want people to read if they're so inclined. But all the people who don't follow this sport or cover it, who think they know it, and it's their right to come in and tell you about what happened and how that drives me crazy. Like, you're not here for 3.5 months and you're going to come in and tell me that Matt Painter can't coach, or that the Big Ten's a bad league, or that so-and-so choked, or whatever. It's ridiculous. You don't follow it. You don't know it. Matt Painter is a perfect example of this, okay? They were a number 1 seed. They shouldn't lose as a number 1 seed. Don't get me wrong. They shouldn't lose as a year ago as a 3. I think they were, whatever it was, to 15. They shouldn't. Don't get me wrong. Those were not great performances. And I think that Matt needs to look at, okay, why is this happening? I'm sure he does, but I think that it's fair to ask, why is this happening? But to say he's anything less than an elite coach is to not understand the sport. I looked this up the other day. I wanted to see, okay, who do the Boilers have coming in next year as prospects for next year's team? There's a good chance they're going to have a bunch of guys back. I've heard a lot that Zach Edey will be back. My understanding is he didn't want to deal with the question after the FDU game.
I expected him to come back.
Yeah, I a lot of people that I've spoken to who know the program well expect him back. But so I looked at, they're looking just to see, okay, well, what are they going to have in addition to whoever comes back? What are they going to have next year? And I was looking at their commitment page on 24/7 Sports. And for every school out there, they have rated the greatest recruits of each program, UCLA, Kentucky, whoever. Okay. And it's according to their own rating system, the number they assign to them, et cetera. Purdue's had one 5-star player since 24/7 started doing this. It's about 2 decades. One 5-star player. That's all. And yet they keep turning out 5-star teams. People don't understand. Purdue is an outstanding program, but it's not the first choice for a lot of young basketball players. If you grow up in the state of Indiana and you want to stay in state, what's the typical first choice? If you grew up in an adjacent state, Michigan, oh, okay, they got a few. Ohio, oh wow, okay. Illinois, yeah. I mean, so like it's not easy to recruit to Purdue because of that, because of where you're located. So you have to be creative and you have to be a great scout and you have to improve players and all that. And all that happens there. And they win the Big Ten championship and they get high tournament seeds. And lately they have not done as well with them as they should. But the idea that all these people know now that he's not a very good coach because they turned in and watched one game, I have to say it's the one thing that makes March less than wonderful for me. Every other aspect of this month puts me over the top. It's a legal drug, so to speak. Right. But that one is the ultimate downer.
And what's always surprising to me, Mike, when we get to this point in the season, is that whether it's a fan or of Purdue or of another team, and people want to start firing coaches and finding the next guy, there's no guarantee that the next guy's going to come in and do anything different. Your program could look at what happened to Indiana after they switched. And I'm not saying Tom Crean should have continued to be the head coach at Indiana. I'm not in that business. Don't care. Not my decision. But look at the drop-off. Tom Crean was winning Big Ten championships, getting them into the NCAA tournament. And what happened under Archie Miller? All of it went away. There's no guarantee that was thought to be a slam dunk hire.
Yeah, I thought Archie would have trouble with the politician aspects of the job, so to speak.
Sure.
And to an extent he did, but I thought that from a basketball standpoint, it was a perfect hire. And from the standpoint of getting in the players in the state that they weren't getting during Tom's tenure. That was the one aspect of Tom that you could criticize, that they weren't getting those guys any longer at IU. He was still going out and getting Thomas Bryant and other players, but the flow of talent from the state had stopped going in that direction. But
he ran
Archie
a foul.
Came in and got those guys.
He ran a foul with the Indiana high school coaches, pretty much.
Well, but that's but that was the problem. But that's
big problem.
But Arch fixed it. But what I'm saying is Arch fixed it, and it still didn't work. I mean, they got Trey and they got Trey.
We'll wait for Mike's connection to recruit. Yeah, the one thing I will disagree with is he got guys that wanted to come to IU first before they wanted to play for Archie. We lost you for a second there.
Yeah. Indiana fans wanted those kids to start coming back to IU,
absolutely.
and they did.
Absolutely, that they wanted them. They wanted kind of what Purdue has. Purdue has a solid team that is built on nothing but Indiana kids. I mean, Indiana kids are probably 80% of that roster. There's maybe 10 to 20% on Indiana's roster. They're, Trey Galloway, Trace Jackson Davis, and Anthony Leal. Are those the only three, I think, scholarship players on Indiana's team from Indiana? I think.
I'd have to look.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that as well. But but my point is that sometimes you make the right hire and it still doesn't work. And the part of this that I don't understand is the need for retribution, so to speak. You lost this game, so you must pay. Not you lost this game. Can you do better next time? And that's been a problem at Kentucky, and I wrote about it in the middle of the year when the one fan. Kentucky fans can't say this didn't happen because we all saw it. One Kentucky fan held up a sign, said, "Please go to Texas." So he was that person was not necessarily alone in their viewpoint. But the point is
he
that
was probably escorted out of Rupp Arena.
He was. But Kentucky has the #1 recruiting class in the country coming in.
They did that for 9 out of 10 years and won one title.
And made 4 Final Fours. Do you not want to be in the Final Four again?
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you, Mike.
My point is that you're saying that we're so mad that you lost a year ago to a 15 seed that we don't care, like that you are going to bring in the best group of prospects in the country next year. We just want you to pay. That's the logic.
Well, I think it's also with Calipari is that they know that it doesn't matter how much talent he has. He is, in my opinion, not the greatest coach. So,
well, how did he win all those games?
Manager.
How is he one of only 3 coaches who's been to Final Fours at 3 different schools? It just happened by accident.
The players, he out recruits people. Not out recruiting, but
there's never been a team that had great prospects that wasn't any good at all.
That's not my point. I just don't think that he has done. He does more. He does less with more.
That's not factual.
And to this point again, remember when Kentucky wanted to move? I don't remember who the coach was beforehand, and they hired Billy Gillespie, who was really hot out of Texas A&M. Look at what happened.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why people get into the March. Look, I love it, but it's also a crapshoot. It's all about matchups. You're trying to define a coaching tenure, a season by one game.
Right.
Purdue's going to go down in history because they lost a 16-1. But a lot of people are going to look back on this season and say Purdue overachieved because they won a Big Ten championship. They won the Big Ten tournament. That was just the second time they've done that. I understand this isn't going to be a banner year for Kentucky, but when you look at what John Calipari, you're constantly in the SEC hunt. You're always in the NCAA tournament. You're always a threat to be in the Final Four. Do you not want that? You could hire 3 new coaches, and for 10 years, you could be sub 500. There are no guarantees. That's what I don't understand why people think the next coach is automatically going to take the program to new heights and win national championships. It doesn't matter whether it's Kentucky, Purdue, Indiana. It doesn't matter. That mindset is just – it's crazy to me. And it's not just basketball, but I feel like you get that more with March because people have higher expectations in March.
I think you're right. I think the suddenness of March makes it happen more often.
I agree with that 100%.
But I do think that the idea of firing successful coaches is who are solid citizens, I should say, is ridiculous to me. And I have this argument all the time with Steelers fans. They've never had a losing season under their current coach. They've played in 2 Super Bowls, won one of them, as well as another AFC Championship game. You don't get rid of that. It's just smart programs don't. The ones that do are the ones that are always trying to climb back to that level. Oh, I wish we could be back in the playoffs. Well, yeah, but you're the one that said it wasn't good enough. I just thought that the way people reacted to Painter's to the Purdue's performance in Columbus was rather ridiculous.
I agree with you because I agree with that they were. What was the word you used?
I think it was Dustin said overachieving. Yeah, and they did.
Because I agree with that because they did overachieve with those freshman guards.
Yes,
and you knew that they were going to take punches in the gut. I didn't think it was going to come in the first round of the NCAA tournament, which makes it really embarrassing. But Matt Painter is not going anywhere. He does not deserve to go anywhere. He is a lifer. He is going to be there as long as he wants to be, and he should be because he does it the right way. The players love playing for him. The fans love what they have. They have a great environment. They've got it going on. But we didn't get to talk about the tournament. Gee whiz.
We did, really. We just didn't talk about these next group of games. Well, I think we covered a lot of what makes the tournament the tournament.
Yeah.
Florida Atlantic, they got a shot against Tennessee.
Yeah, I think. I think some of it comes down to how the game is called, Jim. Because the Tennessee Duke game was called exactly as Tennessee would have wanted it to be. One of the interesting things about Tennessee ranked, I think, 22nd. Tennessee opponents ranked 22nd in terms of the number of their points that were generated at the foul line. So if they fouled a lot, they got called a lot, they allowed a lot of free throws, and they still won. That's the way it went. And then on Saturday, when they played Duke, they were called for 11 fouls in the entire game. That's not what happened. That's not, and I will tell you, that's not what's happened all through this tournament. It has been much too physical, much too. I saw a cutter bumped as hard in the Kentucky-Kansas State game as I've seen in 30 years. I hadn't seen something like that since I covered the Cincinnati Bearcats, who were among the pioneers of the art of bumping cutters. and I saw that, and I'm like, wow. I hadn't seen it since Jermaine Tate chucked I can't remember the Murray kid's first name who played for Louisville, but he was going through the lane, and Jermaine laid him out like he was a pulling guard and coming up on a free safety. And I saw a hit like that in Sunday's game, and nothing was called. I heard a stat yesterday. I'll give Dallin Cuff from ESPN Radio credit for this. 75% of the first two rounds on this bracket, 75% went under the Vegas total. That's bad. That's not supposed to be what's happening. And it wasn't because guys couldn't make baskets. It's because they weren't free to make baskets. Yeah. The NCAA has to do better with how they instruct the officials to call these games.
That could go on. That's a discussion that could go on all day right there. Mike, what is up next for you in the middle of this madness?
I'm headed to Louisville on Thursday. I'll be covering the South region with Creighton and Alabama and Princeton and San Diego State. All the people that you would expect to be in Louisville, right?
Yeah, that looks like a tough run for Alabama there.
Yeah, when I saw the bracket, I wrote that night, that Sunday night, that it was as easy a bracket as could have been imagined. But even at that, I didn't expect necessarily that they would have cleared out numbers 2, 3, and 4, and that they'd be facing numbers 15, 7, and 5 instead.
Yeah. Crazy. All right, Mike. We can't thank you enough. Look forward to next week. Looking forward to the Final Four.
I think maybe next week we should just sit down for my 40 minutes and just argue about Calipari. I think that's what we should do.
Oh, man.
That sounds great. I'm all in.
I have to admit, I've got to weed out the childhood dislike of Kentucky out of that discussion.
There you go.
So I'll have
just
to
think of him as forever the UMass coach, and then you'll be better.
That'll help. The great Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News Big Ten. Make sure you catch him this week all around and follow his brackets. Make sure you I'd be using the same teams he does. He's a winner.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Dustin. Take care.
Coming up next, Chronic Hoosier, who's been patiently waiting in the green room. We're back with more, brought to you by Meadowworks Brewing Company, right here in Bloomington, located right off of 6th Street, off the square. Dr. Hops, go see what Dr. Hops has got going. You can also find them at any of the restaurants or in and around town that are under the Endeavor Hospitality brand. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. If you're looking for
Gosh, I'm like every other team right now, chasing my ass, trying to catch up.
I'm out after this. I've got to be done in 7 minutes. So
if you want to go ahead and drop Dustin, you're probably fine.
Yeah, sorry. I'll see you tomorrow.
It's all good. All right, later.
See ya.
Chronic, how you doing, brother?
Oh, I am living in system conversion hell. How about you?
Yeah, I'm just tired right now.
That makes two of us. We on the heels of having a complete server crash and replacement.
God, that's always
last week before. Yeah, now we have an entirely new system and stuff that I would normally have been done with by 10 o'clock yesterday. I'm halfway through today. I have engineers on site and nobody knows what's going on. So yeah, living the good life. And I got 4 hours sleep because I couldn't sleep after that gosh darn women's basketball game last night.
Yeah, it took me a while. I think I got this. I don't know, 1:30.
Yeah, it's a rough 24 hours for IU.
When it rains, it pours, right?
Well, that starts tomorrow, from what I just.
Da-da-da. John, that's why you need to have that damn roadcaster up with the rim shot.
Oh, rim shot, yeah.
I'm here all night. And I mean, literally, I'll probably be here all night. I think I worked 3 14-hour days last week or greater.
Because of the server?
Because of everything. Yeah, it's partly that, partly my partner in crime over here.
Lost him.
That was interesting. I guess he accidentally hit something.
Thursday.
Yesterday's wine. Oh, here's Chronic. Oh, sort of.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
I think my face jumped me out of my screen. But yeah, other than that, I am doing well. Actually, speaking of Endeavor, got to do a deal with your guy, James Hinderer.
Yeah?
Yeah, he had nothing but great things to say about Indiana Sports Beat.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that nice?
Now, who's James Hinderer?
The head of the kitchens cook, run it over at Endeavor. He's the one that's the Florida man. Jim, maybe?
Oh. Yeah, he just came up, I think.
Yeah, yes. I call everybody by their legal names, whatever's on their contracts.
All right, here we go,
Unless you
guys.
tell me otherwise.
Cruise and will be offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants. Come taste with Dr. Hobbs' Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday. Of course, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda. Make sure you get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com. Welcome in, Chronic Hoosier. How are you, sir?
I'm glad to be here. It's a little rough being a Hoosier this week, but I'm glad to be back joining you guys talking about it.
Yeah, I can imagine a very, very rough 24 hours for Indiana, like you said in the break. But not only that, it is more importantly, beyond the suddenness of the tournament's ending, surprisingly for both teams, especially the women, it's the end of two eras. One is more notable probably than the other, but no less impactful. I can guarantee you. As a matter of fact, not as impactful. While Trace Jackson Davis's career has been much more notable for all the records that he has set, Grace Berger on the other side, her impact on that women's program was immense. In that locker room last night, Chronic, the tears were equal for the loss, which was horrific for them, as to not getting to play with Grace Berger anymore, and that was very clear.
Yeah, that was tough. I tweeted it out last night. It was much of the season for the women's team at least has reminded me of the 92 men's. Just the way they steamrolled through the competition, just absolute dominance. Some of the best basketball Indiana fans have seen, literally, in quarter plus century. That ending, though, just smacked of the 13 squad, a team that had the target on their back the entire season, and in a really tight conference race, you could see with each passing win just the toll it was taking on their bodies. And just the weight of the expectations that they were having to carry. And come tournament time, the chinks in the armor were apparent, and they just fell short. And what struck me for all the similarities was just how much it hurt on the personal level. Because when you look at that roster that Terry Morin brought this year, the caliber of the character on on that team, the personalities. It was a really, really tough team not to love on a personal level. And, you know, for me personally, you got to share that with my kids, you know, and those are the Hoosiers that they, you know, they look up to as the superlative examples of what it means. And you're going to have a hard time finding a better superlative example of what a Hoosier is than Grace Berger, quite honestly, even though the girl's a Kentuckian, just tough as nails, plays the game the right way. Consummate competitor, consummate teammate. It's just tough to see it end in that manner for her. But looking at the tears in my kids' eyes, and you're just like, I get it. I've been there. I remember watching Damon lose. It sucked. It's tough to swallow when you see, you know, a team that's about as close to invincible as you maybe ever seen in your life, you know, be proven fallible. And it was a bitter pill to swallow, but it's also one of those where you take a step back and you look at just how dang far this program's come. I mean, you know, heretofore this season, you hadn't seen the gym that full since the WNIT. And for a team to make that big of a leap in that short of a time and to be filling the gym even larger, and NCAA tournament games and conference games, whatever, is just nothing short of remarkable. A testament to Terry Moore and her staff. But especially to the players who bought in, because as much has been discussed over the years, this is an easy program to play for. You know, they literally, their motto is do the work. Work is expected, and they make no bones about it. Those girls work really, really, really dang hard, and they sacrifice quite a bit to give the performance that we've been able to receive from them. So you hate to see that work not get rewarded by advancing a little further, but as we know full well from the 24 hours prior, that's just the way single elimination tournament basketball happens. And, you know, the only hope at this point is that, as we've seen in the past, they just continue to achieve new levels, which is going to be tough to do, but that's the standard that's been set now. And whether it's Grace, you know, Alexa Goulbe, Tyra Buss, Amanda Cahill, you can just keep going on down the line of all the amazing competitors that we've seen just in a few short years that Coach Morin's been here. I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. So excited for what the future holds, just still a really, really bitter taste in the mouth after last night.
Yeah. Fortunately for the women, they only, and that's in quotations, they only lose Grace Berger, which, yeah, that's a lot. I get it. But they have a lot coming back. The year before, they lost Ali Patberg, Alexa Goulbe, who am I missing? You just said her. They had 3 starters from the year before that they lost. And so they came back this year with that and did more. So they're still set next year, where the men on the other side, that's a completely different story. I expect to see, I've set the line. I haven't said this yet, Chronic, until now. I've saved it, but I have set the line at new faces on the team next year at 6.
I think it's a good over-under, honestly. I think just when you look at what you know is walking out the door through graduation, you know, I do expect we're going to see, you know, at least one, if not a couple, exits through the portal. There's going to be a lot of minutes available. I fully expect a team that's pretty unrecognizable, both in faces as well as in style of play from what we've seen this year. So it's going to be a fascinating offseason for the men's team in that regard, because it's going to be a very different roster than what we last saw against Miami, but also probably a very different style of play. I think Mike Woodson has made pretty clear that he's, you know, he was talking about it the other day. He hasn't ever had a big that he had to use just solely as a post-up player like this before he took over Indiana. So I don't know that that's the style that he's going to choose to continue to play going forward. But we'll see. The thing about this day and age, though, that with enough players already in the portal, who knows what's to come now that they know that those availabilities are open. It's going to be a wild couple of weeks, month or so.
The needs or some of the needs are obvious this season, but not necessarily. You know, everyone keeps saying that Indiana needs shooters. Oh, they need shooters. Well, damn, they had a couple of guys that were pretty damn good shooters. That wasn't quite the case, but they do need some wing. They're going to need wings, that's for certain. But and bigs, but the style of play that's been talked about. It was talked about with Don, but it just didn't match up, and especially in NCAA play. It seems like trading threes for twos is that doesn't work, as we know. But I don't know. The Big Ten is kind of everyone has that similar style, and they've got to kind of get out of that.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And I think you see that very clearly in just who advanced, who didn't, and not just who, but how, the style of play that caused their defeat. So I don't know that that's coming sooner than perhaps later, but eventually it's going to happen if they hope to ever break that drought that they just keep racking up now as far as the Final Four absences. And, when you start extending that into the lower levels, it just becomes even more obvious that what they've got going right now is just not working and hasn't worked, quite honestly, for a couple of decades.
Yeah, and I don't know why they haven't caught on to that by now, but and talking about the lack of success of the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament, Don thinks for IU that the fatigue played a part, but as far as the conference, I don't know. What is it about the Big Ten is the only conference that plays 20 games, but did those extra 2 games really make that much difference?
Yes and no. I think you see a lot of teams that have different philosophies about the non-conference, whether you're just stacking wins, how difficult of a challenge you try to put in front of your team and how quickly. I think more than anything, though, you've got to take an honest stock of not just what your fans see, but look at the product that you're trying to attract from a talent standpoint. Why?
Well, why do you do those things? I don't know. John, why do you do those things?
I don't know. Everyone has a reason for something, but sometimes you don't, I guess.
Do you have the clips? I know Chronic will be back here in a second, but do you have the clips ready?
I do. Do you want to look at any right now?
And did you have the women's as well?
I have both the men and the women, yes.
Okay, definitely. I definitely want to hear from the one on
Grace Berger, Mackenzie Holmes.
Yeah, is Sydney Parrish on playing with Grace?
Of course, it's the one I don't have. I don't have Sydney Parrish. I have Mackenzie Holmes talking about Grace Berger.
Okay, that's a good one.
Okay, right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I can't put it into words. It's been a privilege to play with her for 4 years, and I never expected this to be my last time, but I'm so thankful that I got the chance to play with her alongside her for 4 years. It's been an extreme blessing.
You could hear the emotion in her voice there, and for those of you that see the show on YouTube, you can see it. As soon as I asked her that question, she just dropped her head and put her face in her hands, and it was the same way with Sydney Parrish. I mean, Sydney had been more, when I got back over to Sydney to ask that question to her, she was a little more composed by then, but it really affected them hard. Let's hear what Sydney had to say.
I just said I don't have Sydney's.
I
don't have.
Then what?
I do have Grace Berger's comments.
How about Grace?
I mean, I knew it was eventually, going to come to an end. It was inevitable, but I mean, I loved being a Hoosier every single second of it. It was the best decision I've ever made, and Coach Morin is someone that is going to impact me, far more than just my 5 years here. So, I love this program. I love this university. I love my coaches. I love my teammates. And it's sad that it's ending, but I'm just very grateful that it happened.
Grace Berger, with obviously emotional words, but she was able to be composed. But that's because she is so even keeled, man. She was hurting, but yet it's amazing to see the difference of emotions of how people deal with them. But the fact that, she, like Chronic mentioned that, and I asked her that question to start, what it's meant to her. And, she was from Louisville, but she will be remembered as one of the ones that really helped catapult the program. There were others before her, obviously. Tyra Buss was actually from Illinois. Allie Patberg from Indiana, but it just shows you can go someplace and become a part of that. And that's no more evident than with Grace Berger and how she has become the face of being a Hoosier, really. Congratulations to them on that great season. I hate that it ended like that for them. I really do. You got to feel bad for the IU athletics department. Golly, not only do they take such an emotional blow, because those people they're invested. Scott Dolson's invested. Scott was in tears last night. That hurts him to see that women's team lose. Brian Braze, good people like that. Got to see him last night, sat next to him. It's a financial hit to the university as well. I mean, think about that. And not only that, for the Indiana women's and the men's, you don't get to use that platform of the national television audience of the tournament where everybody's watching. That's a big platform. That is a big, big platform. And unfortunately, especially for Indiana women, not that they're having problems recruiting, because they're not. Success breeds success. But it's still, it just helps stamp. When you continue to stamp, you wonder why you hear Duke, you heard Duke all the time. Well, because they're in the Sweet 16 or beyond all the damn time. So when your name's up there all the time, that's going to happen. Right. Did you say break?
I did.
All right. We've got to take a quick break. We've got more coming up, and we'll hear from more Indiana players when we come back after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
John Boy?
Yes, sir.
I guess what clips do you have?
Race Thompson in the locker room, Miller Kopp in the locker room. Miller Kopp's clip was really good. And then I got Terry Moore in as well. It's not a locker room clip, but in case you want to go back to that.
Do you not have any more locker room from the women?
I just grabbed the two right there. I didn't realize Sydney Parrish was the one that you wanted primarily, but I can.
Well, there's a short one. There's two Sydney Parrishes. You need to go to the ISB YouTube channel.
Well, that's what I did. I just didn't know you wanted the Sydney Parishes. I thought they were the same thing. I couldn't.
There are two Sydney Parishes. One's shorter.
You want the short one?
Yeah. Well,
here's what we'll do. We can have it. I can have it here quickly. Just won't be any video. It'll be audio. Do you want the whole 51 seconds of it?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Then I'll have that if you want to use it. And you'll have about 4 minutes or so to wrap up.
After the clips?
Just once we come back from commercial.
So we don't really have time for clips today.
I mean, you can run whatever ones you want if you want to talk about them, but it's up to you.
And yes, the system has to change. I love Andy. No matter what, if I ever see something that starts with "having said that," it always gets my attention. That's why I had to go back and look at his previous comment, because you can't read into that. But I love having said that. I don't blame Woody for an offense that primarily focuses on
And speaking of the transfer portal and stuff with Woody, Indiana needs to go after a guy named John Hughley from Pittsburgh.
You can tell me that on air, because that is the next subject matter. Steven, why did Caleb Banks deserve more playing time this year? You can't say that stuff, man. You can't throw that out. You were not in a single practice.
All right, here we go, guys.
I think he's
Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by K-Bello. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here, brought to you by our good friends from K-Bello Restaurant, located on the square in Bloomington. Get a taste of Southern Italy right here in Southern Indiana. Back, looking at the Andy Moore Honda hotline, Kevin Brockwig. K-Bro said 11 different conferences in the Sweet 16, pointing out. Think about that, people. 11 different conferences. That's rich. That's spread out. Let's see. We have, and I'm going to get K-Bro on this week. We'll talk to K-Bro about the tournament. I think what is the clip you have, John?
Did you want to do the Sydney Parrish one? Audio?
Yeah, go ahead and run that one. This is, I think, Sydney talking about playing with Grace Berger.
Sorry,
You're
the same question. Playing with Grace, what's that been like for you, for your game, for everything?
Yeah. I wasn't with her for a long time. I've been with her for only a year. But in my first years of college basketball, I was really lost. And like I said, she's a big reason why I came here. She makes everyone around her better. And she's a big reason why a lot of girls want to come here and play basketball now. Like, Sarah probably wouldn't be here if Grace wasn't here, because Grace makes this program run. Everything goes through Grace, and she's going to be one of the best to ever come through Indiana women's basketball. And it's just not going to be the same without her. We're going to miss her.
Yeah, that was the hardest question that anybody answered last night. I could have asked them anything about the game, which we did, which, they were already emotional about losing, but that question triggered emotion every time. And it was raw, real, true emotion. And it was palpable. You could see it and feel it. And you have to really, really appreciate that. It's hard to without seeing it. I get it. But wow, what an impact she made on that program. And I don't care if we're talking men's, women's, basketball, or checkers. It doesn't matter. If you can make that kind of an impact on people, man, you're doing something. And that is, if you hear Terry Morin, go back and listen to her. That's how she talks about Grace Berger. Too bad we don't have more people like her around, because not only is she one of the greatest people, she's a great baller, man. Dude, she is a straight up baller. But one of the great things I heard Terry talking about last night is when talking, and I should have had you get this clip. I'll have you get it tomorrow, of Terry Morin talking about her, that she's the biggest introvert, but
that she's not on social media. She doesn't need that platform. She's not, she's just doing, she's staying out of the limelight, not courting it. She's just playing basketball and working hard. Gotta love that. So, looking forward to tomorrow. Man, another loaded show. Bob Kravitz, Kyle Ledenrip, and Rick Bozich, the normal lineup. We'll catch up. We will get caught up on what is going on in the NCAA tournament, as there are games coming this week. And we'll get those scouted. Alabama, like we said, man, they got a clear path. Who's going to come out of the West? Gonzaga, UCLA, that's going to be a battle. And you got the Midwest. Houston. I think Miami beats Houston. It's going to be interesting. You got Texas and Xavier there as well. And then we'll find out all the rest. Back tomorrow to take care of this. Thanks to John, the producer. Of course, Don Fischer. Mike DeCourcy, Chronic Hoosier. Most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, we have no reason to be here, and we greatly appreciate you so much. We're back tomorrow to do this again. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.